Welcome to the review of the new Protos Ready-to-Fly FPV kit for beginners from Caddx. I am ButterflyFPV, and in this video, I'll show you what features the Caddx Protos has and how it flies. I'll try to show you all the advantages and disadvantages to give you a good basis for your purchase decision. Together, we explore in this in-depth review and video guide the possibilities of the Caddx Protos Ready-to-Fly Beginner FPV kit and the special features that the Caddx Protos has to offer. And of course, we also explore the limits of this FPV drone, just as you are used to from this YouTube channel. Every aircraft has its limits that need to be explored, ideally by an experienced pilot like me, so that you can learn from this video and be well prepared for your first flight with the Caddx Protos, and so that you can have as much fun as possible. That is my goal. The Caddx Protos Ready-to-Fly kit includes everything you need to fly and costs $359 at the time of making this video. The Protos is a small, durable FPV drone. Please don't ask me how I know it's durable. The Protos has a takeoff weight of 103 grams on my scale and an HD video transmission, which Caddx calls Ascent. As a special feature, Caddx offers a unique type of signal strength display in the Ascent video transmission system, where the image switches from 16 to 9 to 4 to 3 when video reception is poor, to prevent the video signal from cutting out during flight and causing the drone to crash. I'll come back to this later in the video. The Protos from Caddx features various flight modes, from position hold to angle mode and up to Acro mode, from easy to difficult. In the easiest flight mode, the position hold mode, the drone almost hovers by itself. I'll explain these flight modes in more detail later in this video. Furthermore, there is a flip over after crash mode to flip the drone back upright, as well as a beeper to help you find the drone after a crash. That was very helpful during my test flights, as you will see later in the video. I was always glad that I found the Protos FPV drone again after a crash, so I could continue making professional flights with it. For example, blowing leaves or enjoying the sunset and watching the beautiful colors of the leaves on the trees. In my view, these are also the main use cases of the Caddx Protos FPV Ready-to-Fly kit. Learning FPV flying and then making relaxed, careful, smooth flights within a range of about 100 meters. Light aerobatics like flips, rolls, and loops are also possible with the Protos. The flight time varies between 8.5 minutes when hovering at 22 degrees Celsius ambient temperature, and up to 5 minutes during light aerobatic flight at 15 degrees Celsius ambient temperature. More about that later in this video. The biggest advantages of the Caddx Protos Ready-to-Fly FPV Beginner Kit are, in my opinion, the completeness of the Ready-to-Fly kit, as well as the simplicity with which the Caddx Protos kit can bring you into the wonderful hobby of FPV flying. And of course, also the price, which is very low for such a complete Ready-to-Fly FPV kit, at least as long as you are satisfied with what the Protos can offer you and you don't want more. I will come back to this later in the video. The strengths of the Protos drone itself are the good flight time and the robustness up to a certain degree, as well as the special feature of the Ascent video system, which allows beginners to easily and clearly learn the limits of video reception as long as they fly slowly. More about that later in the video. In summary, my conclusion is that the Protos is robust enough and quite suitable for beginners. However, the Protos has its limits, which you will get to know if you watch this video all the way through. From my point of view, the biggest disadvantage of the Caddx Protos Ready-to-Fly FPV Beginner Kit is that parts of it, such as the Ascent FPV goggles and the flight batteries, are not compatible with other systems. More about that later in the video. I think many people will enjoy their Protos. There is no right or wrong. The important thing is that you inform yourself well before buying and know what you want. That's why I made this video, to inform you well before and after buying the Protos. I hope you liked the video, and if so, you can support my work on Ko-Fi.com, give this video a like, write a comment, and subscribe to this YouTube channel if you want to be informed when I make a new video. I will make at least 2 more videos about the Protos. Also check out the tutorials on this channel about learning FPV flying and line-of-sight flying. As already mentioned, the Caddx Protos comes with everything needed for flying, and also for storage. The Caddx Protos FPV Beginner Kit comes in a transport case, which protects the contents during transport. In the Protos Beginner Kit from Caddx, there is the Protos drone, 3 lithium-ion flight batteries, a charger for the flight batteries, a power supply for the flight battery charger, a USB-C to USB-C cable, a remote controller, a USB to USB-C charging cable, FPV goggles, a battery for the FPV goggles, an XT30 to barrel connector cable, 4 spare propellers, a spare canopy with screws, and a microfiber cleaning cloth. The plug adapter for the flight battery charger had to be purchased separately and is not included in the kit. An interesting detail of the Protos remote control is that it features Hall effect gimbals and that the remote control uses an ELRS protocol and can theoretically also be bound to other FPV drones that use an ELRS link. However, it does not have a display, no trim function, and no other options. According to Caddx, the remote control can also be used as a simulator controller, which I have not yet tested. Caddx and I recommend that you practice on an FPV simulator before your first flight with the Protos. The Ascent FPV goggles are of relatively good quality and can be equipped with optical lenses for glasses wearers, which are not included in the package. The fit on my head shape was okay, but not perfect. There were light leaks from both sides from the back. Of course, this depends on head shape and may be completely different for you. The head strap is sufficient, but I would have liked an additional strap that goes over the middle of the head to the back to better distribute the weight of the goggles. All in all, the Caddx Ascent goggles are absolutely usable, and for some people great, and for others okay. Something is only included in the first 200 orders of the Protos, according to the Caddx website. I don't exactly understand what it is. I think it's the power supply for the flight battery charger or some kind of USB cable. I'm not sure. But I want you to know that possibly not everything you see here is included in the kit you receive if you are not one of the first 200 buyers. I find it a bit unfortunate that Caddx does it this way, but it is what it is. Caddx designed the Protos so that you can theoretically learn to fly with it. However, both Caddx and I recommend first learning to fly with an FPV simulator, such as the Velocidrone FPV simulator, which you can buy at a low price. According to Caddx, the remote controller of the Protos can be used as a simulator controller, but I have not tested that yet. If possible, practice for a few hours on the FPV simulator before flying the Protos for the first time. Before the first flight, you must read and remove the warning stickers on the drone. You can charge the FPV goggles battery with any standard 5-volt charger or a power bank with a 5-volt output. The FPV goggles battery is fully charged when all 4 LEDs are solid. The same applies to the remote controller, which you can also charge with any standard 5-volt charger or power bank with a 5-volt output. The remote controller is also fully charged when all 4 LEDs are solid. Charging the flight batteries is done with the included flight battery charger, which charges the flight batteries sequentially. That means one after another. Charging takes about 20 minutes per battery. That means about 1 hour for all 3 batteries. The batteries are fully charged when all 4 LEDs of one slot are solid. The flight battery charger has 2 modes, a storage mode and a charging mode. You can switch between the 2 modes by pressing and holding the function button on the charger for 3 seconds. In storage mode, one LED after another moves to the right. The storage process takes about 50 minutes per battery and about 2.5 hours for all 3 batteries if they were fully charged. When the storage process is finished, 2 LEDs per slot are solid. Unfortunately, it is impossible to tell whether the charger is in storage charge mode or in charge mode when the batteries are full or 3/4 full. Caddx urgently needs to improve this. It happened to me a few times that I accidentally fully charged the batteries instead of bringing them to storage charge voltage. It's not a big deal, but a bit annoying. When the batteries are fully charged, you can press the mode button on the charger again, and then you can be sure that the charger is in storage charge mode. It's best not to interrupt the storage charge process afterward. Otherwise, you'll forget which mode your charger is in. Always make sure to monitor the process and be present. Never perform a storage charge unattended. If you want to charge your flight batteries shortly after flying, your charger may display an error message because the flight battery is still too warm to charge. The charger then blinks with all 4 LEDs on the corresponding charging slot, which means that something is wrong. In this case, you can leave the battery in the charger. The charging process will automatically start when the battery has cooled down enough. Ideally, you should wait until the flight battery has cooled before inserting it into the charging slot. In the storage state, you can store the flight batteries for a longer period of time. Make sure that you do not store the flight batteries fully charged or fully discharged for more than 3 days. After that, you should bring the flight batteries to storage voltage using the storage mode of the charger, which means that the flight battery is about half full. This way, it can be stored for a long time. According to Caddx, you can store the flight batteries in the charger when it is disconnected from the power supply. Personally, however, I recommend storing the batteries separately and outside the charger. Please read all safety instructions in the manual. Never charge or store your LiPos unattended. The Protos should already be bound to the remote control and the Ascent FPV goggles. At least in my Protos kit, which I received from Caddx, that was the case. So just charge the batteries and start flying. A real ready-to-fly kit. I hope it's the same with your Protos. The manual explains how to bind the Protos to the remote control, but I think for most people this won't be necessary because, as mentioned, the Protos is delivered already bound from Caddx. The remote controller of the Protos is configured in mode 2. That means the left stick on the vertical axis is the throttle stick with which you control the height of the Protos. The left stick on the horizontal axis is responsible for the yaw rotation, that is, for turning the drone. The right stick on the vertical axis controls the pitch movement, that is, the forward tilt of the drone. And the right stick on the horizontal axis controls the roll movement, that is, the sideways tilt of the drone. The Caddx Protos has 3 main flight modes. The easiest flight mode is the position hold mode, in which the Protos maintains its position and altitude by itself. The LED of the Protos glows orange in the position hold flight mode. A small warning at this point. Please do not confuse the orange LED with the red LED. The colors are unfortunately quite similar. With the throttle stick, you can set the altitude in position hold mode, and when the throttle stick is in the middle, the Protos roughly holds its height. The position hold mode works quite well, and the Protos flies almost by itself and hovers almost in place in this mode. However, depending on the surface, the Protos may no longer detect altitude and position reliably. Therefore, it is important to fly for the first time on an even, flat surface, for example, over a shortcut, even lawn, so that you don't experience any surprises and can fully concentrate on learning to fly. Later, you can still find out where the limits of the position hold mode of the Protos are. But for the first flight, you should create ideal conditions for the position hold mode. Ultimately, you are always the pilot. The drone does not fly entirely for you. You are always responsible for the flight. Please note that the position hold mode of the Protos is not designed for strong wind, high flight speeds, high altitudes, or rapidly changing surfaces. Accept and respect the limits of the position hold flight mode. Then you will learn quickly, and the position hold mode will help you with that. The intermediate flight mode is called angle mode. The LED of the Protos glows blue in angle mode. In this mode, you have to control the altitude of the Protos with the throttle stick yourself. You also have to control all other functions yourself. The pitch and roll axes are self-leveling. This means that when you release the stick, the Protos automatically levels itself again. The maximum tilt angle of the Protos in the air is limited to about 30 degrees in angle mode. This means that loops and flips are not possible in angle mode. The wind can influence the flight path in angle mode. So make sure you always fly with focus in this flight mode and are always ready to switch back to position hold mode and land the drone safely. After a hard crash, it may happen that your angle mode drifts strongly to one side. Then an IMU recalibration is necessary. I will come back to that later in this video. Please note that the angle mode of the Protos is not designed for strong wind and high flight speeds because the angle on the Protos is limited to about 25 degrees. Unfortunately, this angle is not adjustable. If you want to fly your Protos on a day with strong wind, it may happen that you can no longer return to the starting point in angle mode because the wind blows you away. Therefore, use the angle mode only on days with moderate wind, or ideally, on a windless day. The advanced flight mode is called Acro mode. In this flight mode, you can control the Protos completely freely, and flips, rolls, and loops are also possible. The LED of the Protos glows red in this mode. In Acro flight mode, no self-leveling is active anymore. This means that when you make a control input, you give the Protos a position that it moves to, and once it reaches that position, it holds that angle approximately even if you move the stick back to the center. Only when you move the stick to the opposite side can you reduce the previously set angle position again. It's like balancing on one leg. In Acro mode, you always have to be active and actively balance the Protos. It sounds harder than it is, but it does require a certain learning phase. Make sure you have practiced the Acro flight mode in the simulator before trying this mode in real life with the Protos. The Acro mode is also very well suited for smooth cinematic flying. That is, from my point of view, also the main purpose of the Protos. The Protos can also perform light aerobatic maneuvers, but there are much better and more powerful FPV drones for that. Make sure that you stay within the flight limits of the Protos. Rolls, flips, and loops are fine. But for dives and split S maneuvers, the Protos is not designed in my opinion, and based on my flight experience with it. On the right 3-position switch SC on the remote control, you can set the rotation rate, also called rates, for Acro mode from easy to difficult. In the lowest position, your Protos rotates at 300 degrees per second. In the middle position, at 400 degrees per second, and in the highest position at 500 degrees per second. Personally, I always flew at 500 degrees per second. This rate switch only applies to Acro mode. In the other flight modes, the rate switch SC is inactive. The rates are unfortunately not further adjustable. 600 degrees per second is personally too little for me. I would prefer 800 degrees per second, and the Expo setting is too strong for my taste. The Protos comes with a lot of Expo on all axes. That's okay for absolute beginners, but for intermediate pilots, it's an obstacle to being able to fly precisely. I recommend that you do not switch between the different flight modes during flight at the beginning. In theory, you can switch back and forth between position hold mode and angle mode during flight. The problem, however, is that the Protos rapidly loses altitude when you switch from position hold mode to angle mode. That can quickly overwhelm a beginner. Therefore, I recommend making a short landing to switch between flight modes. You can, of course, also climb in position hold mode and switch to angle mode during ascent to dampen the altitude loss effect. But I would not recommend it. You can switch to position hold mode at any time. However, always expect that something unexpected may happen. Do not rely on it. It is better to fly focused and carefully in one mode and learn to control your Protos yourself. The flip over after crash mode is not a flight mode. This mode is for flipping the Protos over after a crash on a flat surface. With the flip over after crash mode, you can reverse the motor direction and flip the Protos as long as the drone is on a relatively flat surface, and at least 2 propellers are free and can spin freely. It is very important that you only spin the propellers that are free. To activate the flip over after crash mode, you have to press the right SD switch on your remote controller once. The drone must be disarmed. Then you have to arm the motors. Now you can give short throttle pulses with your right stick on the remote controller. If the propellers are not free, the motor controller can be destroyed. So use this mode only in emergencies and with great caution. On a flat surface, the flip over after crash mode works well, but on grass, it does not work because the propellers are not free. To turn off the flip over after crash mode, also called FOAC, you must first disarm again. After that, you can press the FOAC switch once, and you are back in the previous flight mode and can continue flying. The beeper mode is also not a flight mode. This mode is used to locate and find your Protos when you have crashed in a field. To activate the beeper, Press the left SA switch on your remote controller once. Then the motors of your drone will beep. Do not use the beeper for a long time continuously because it drains the battery of your drone and the motors can overheat. The motors are used to generate the beeping sound. The beeper mode is very useful, but do not rely on it. Always fly over a short-cut lawn, a field, or an area with low plants. Never fly over very tall grass, cornfields, wheat fields, rapeseed fields, or similar. In those fields, you will not find your Protos again. Do not fly over water with your Protos either. Make sure that all your batteries are charged before you head to the flight location. With a short click on the button, you can check on your remote control and also on your goggles battery whether the battery is fully charged. If you go flying at an outside temperature below 20 degrees Celsius, it is important that you keep the batteries warm. Only then can they deliver their full power. I carry the flight batteries in a dust-protected grip bag in my hoodie pocket under my jacket so that they have body temperature. That way, the flight batteries can deliver their full performance. Find a large, flat area such as a short-cut lawn without obstacles to fly and get to know your Caddx Protos for the first time. Make sure you do your first flight on a windless day. Do not fly near people or animals and not in populated areas, as the Protos is quite loud and can disturb noise-sensitive people. Respect and consider other people. Only in this way can we ensure that the FPV hobby continues to be accepted in society. Please follow these rules. Always fly over a short-cut lawn, a field, or an area with low plants. Never fly over very tall grass, cornfields, wheat fields, rapeseed fields, or similar. In those fields, you will not find your Protos again. Do not fly over water with your Protos either. To fly your Protos, you must first turn on the remote control. Press and hold the power button until a tone sequence appears. Release the button again. Your remote control is now turned on. Make sure that the throttle stick is all the way down. Connect your goggles battery and the FPV goggles with the supplied cable. Press and hold the power button on the goggles battery until, depending on the charge level, 1 to 3 LEDs are solid and 1 LED is blinking. Then release the button immediately and wait until the FPV goggles start up. Now place your Protos on a stable, dry, and dust-free takeoff surface and insert the flight battery. When you hear a click, the flight battery is properly inserted. Let the Protos stand still for a short moment so it can initialize. You can save your Protos video recordings on an SD card and then transfer them to the computer. However, the SD card is unfortunately formatted by the Caddx Ascent FPV goggles in a way that is only compatible with Windows. That's important to know for Mac users. The goggles menu of the Ascent FPV goggles is quite self-explanatory. It is important to know that you can only select and adjust certain options in the goggles when your Protos is turned on and the Ascent goggles are connected to the Protos. Make sure that you first set the video transmission power of the Protos to 25 milliwatts, and additionally point a small fan at the Protos to cool it down a bit. This is especially important if you spend several minutes in the goggles menu. The most important functions in the goggles menu are the SD card formatting and the setting of the video transmission power. Personally, I didn't use more than that during my test flights. However, there are also other quite useful settings in the goggles menu, such as the camera settings. In the camera settings, you can switch between day and night mode and adjust other parameters such as sharpness and contrast. Or also the video channel setting if you want to fly together with other Protos pilots. As I said, I haven't tested that yet. I really only use the SD card formatting and the video transmission power settings. Maybe I'll make a separate video about the goggles menu if it's requested by many people. Make sure that the throttle stick is all the way down. To start the Protos, you must first arm the motors. You can do this with the left lower arm disarm switch on the remote controller. After arming, the propellers of the Protos spin at idle speed. In this state, it is important that you do not pick up the drone. Depending on the flight mode, the drone may go full throttle if you lift it while the motors are armed. Therefore, make sure that you no longer touch the Protos when the motors are armed. After landing, or in the event of a crash, you must disarm the motors. To do this, press the arming switch on the remote controller again. Make sure you never press this switch during flight. The drone will fall from the sky if you accidentally press this switch while flying. However, in case of loss of control of your drone, it is important that you disarm your Protos in time, ideally just before hitting the ground or an object. The arm disarm switch is the most important switch on your remote controller. In the on-screen display on the screen in the goggles, you see the most important flight information. On the right, you see your throttle position, the reception of your remote control, and the flight time. In the center, you see a green bar indicating the charge level of your flight battery. During flight, it may happen that the green bar drops significantly during strong throttle bursts. That should not worry you. Only when the bar shows just one green field during hovering should you think about landing. On the left side of the display, you see the voltage of the flight battery in volts. The upper value is the voltage of a single cell, and the lower value is the voltage of both cells of your flight battery combined. I always focus on the upper value. At 3.4 volts, you should think about landing. At 3.3 volts, you must land very quickly. The Protos drone has a flight battery protection feature. This means that when the voltage drops to 2.8 volts, the drone automatically shuts down the motors and falls from the sky. So make sure you always land in time. Ideally, come back at 3.5 volts and fly a little lower and closer to yourself until 3.3 volts. Also, make sure that during flight, you take short breaks and briefly monitor the voltage. It can happen very quickly that you stop paying attention to your flight battery because you are in the flow and lose track of time, and then your drone falls from the sky because the battery was empty without you noticing. Never forget and train and discipline yourself to look at the green bar repeatedly during flight to check the status of your flight battery. When flying your Caddx Protos without FPV goggles, the Protos will indicate with a white blinking LED that the flight battery voltage has dropped below 3.5 volts. In this state, you can start preparing to land and should no longer fly far away or give strong throttle. When the white LED blinks very fast, the voltage of the flight battery has dropped below 3.3 volts, and you should land as quickly as possible, ideally within 10 to 15 seconds. Make sure that when flying your Protos, you make slow and smooth stick movements. Fly very carefully and slowly during your first flight and get to know your Protos and its limits, especially the limits of the video transmission. As a special feature, Caddx offers with the Ascent HD video transmission system a special type of signal strength display where the image switches from 16 to 9 to 4 to 3 when video reception is poor to prevent the video signal from breaking during flight and the drone from crashing. This worked in my tests, but only when I was flying very slowly. When flying fast, you cannot rely on this system to protect you from a loss of video signal and a subsequent crash. If video reception is lost, it is important that you stay calm. Leave the sticks in exactly the same position for 1 to 2 seconds. Sometimes the video signal comes back. If not, slowly lower the throttle stick for 1 to 2 seconds to about 10% and disarm the motors. In most cases, this can prevent greater damage. You can also disarm directly, but if you are higher than 10 meters, there is a high chance that your Protos will take damage. Therefore, use my method when flying in a large field where you cannot endanger anyone. The range of the Caddx Ascent HD video transmission system is about 50 meters at 25 milliwatts transmission power and about 100 meters at 100 milliwatts transmission power in an open field without obstacles. As soon as there are tree trunks or other obstacles between you and the Protos, the reception quickly becomes worse. Slowly get used to the characteristics of the Ascent HD video transmission system, and try to fly in the same place at first, so that over time, you memorize where the reception gets worse. Always fly in front of you, and keep your head upright so that the antenna in the front of your Ascent FPV goggles has good reception. If you lower your head too much, the reception quickly worsens. The same applies to the remote control, which you should also hold straight in front of you if possible. Never fly behind yourself. Behind you, the video reception quickly becomes worse because the antenna in your goggles is not designed for that. Therefore, always fly in front of you within a radius of 50 to 100 meters, and preferably not higher than 50 meters. The Ascent video system of the Protos has limited range. From my point of view, the range is somewhat short. But as a beginner, you shouldn't fly farther anyway, because otherwise, you might not find your Protos again after a crash. Therefore, the range of the Protos is probably sufficient for what it was made for. For experienced FPV pilots, the range is a bit disappointing, but for beginner FPV pilots, the range is fine to learn FPV flying. Maybe I'll make a more detailed video in the future about the topic of video reception of the Ascent video system from Caddx. I also briefly tested the low-light performance, and I don't think I need to say much about it. You can see it yourself in the video. You shouldn't fly after sunset. As long as the sun is above the horizon, the image quality is okay. But after sunset, the image quickly becomes much worse. However, I must mention that I only discovered after finishing this Caddx Protos video guide that there is a night setting in the camera tab in the goggles menu when the Protos is connected to the camera. Therefore, my information only applies to the day setting of the camera. The latency of the Caddx Ascent video system is quite high, as with many HD video transmission systems. This means that fast flying through obstacles is difficult to impossible. However, during relaxed, smooth flying, the latency is not disturbing. For me, the Protos is not a race drone, but rather a beginner drone for a cinematic, smooth flying style. The Protos has just enough system power to perform light aerobatic flight. However, I would only recommend it to someone who is already experienced, since the Protos has just enough power and a tendency to so-called washouts, where it tips to one side after dives or other maneuvers like sideways loops and split S. The good thing is that due to the barely sufficient power, recovery was always possible with a few seconds of full throttle. If you manage not to panic and give full throttle for a few seconds, then the Protos will recover from the washout. However, in my opinion, it is difficult for an FPV beginner not to panic. Therefore, I basically recommend not doing aerobatics with the Protos. If you feel very confident in the FPV simulator with loops, rolls, and flips, then you can do that with the Protos. But I wouldn't recommend dives or split S unless you make them very large and very smooth, which is only possible if you already have a lot of experience. In my opinion, it doesn't really make sense to practice aerobatics with the Protos. The Protos is, in my opinion, made for cinematic, smooth flying, which doesn't mean that I might not make another video showing the racing and aerobatic limits of the Protos. We'll see. Stay tuned. In my opinion, the flight time of the Protos is its greatest strength. The Protos uses lithium-ion batteries instead of lithium polymer batteries. In hovering flight in place in an enclosed room without wind and with a temperature of 20 to 22 degrees Celsius, the Protos flies or hovers for up to a maximum of 8.5 minutes. And outside, when hovering or during relaxed, smooth, slow cruising flight without large altitude differences, between 6 and 7 minutes. During more sporty flying with light aerobatics, the flight time is between 5 and 6 minutes, and during very sporty flying, 3 minutes. Basically, I can say that the flight time of the Protos is very acceptable for such a small and rather heavy drone of this size. For beginners, the flight time of the Protos is ideal. Remove the flight battery from the Protos drone immediately after the flight. If you don't do this, the video transmitter can overheat. Do not leave your Protos powered on for more than 2 minutes if possible. Use a small fan to cool your Protos when the drone is turned on, but not flying. When the drone is turned off, the remote control starts beeping to indicate that it has lost connection to the drone. Briefly press the right button to acknowledge this beeping. Press and hold the right button on your remote control to turn it off. Press and hold the button on your goggles battery to turn off your FPV goggles. Remove the cable from the goggles. Clean the Protos drone when needed with a small brush or a damp but not wet cloth. Clean the sensors of the Protos with a damp cotton swab if necessary. In my case, they were once dirty with grass, which caused the Protos to no longer hold its position properly. When storing your Protos and the accessories in the supplied transport case, make sure that the remote control does not turn itself on again. Unfortunately, this is a small design flaw of the Caddx Protos transport case. If your Protos drifts strongly to one side after a hard crash, you can perform the IMU calibration, also called gyro calibration. Follow the instructions in the Protos manual to perform the IMU calibration using the on-screen display in your FPV goggles. You can also perform the IMU calibration without goggles in an emergency. Place the Protos on a perfectly level surface. Move the left stick of your remote control to the bottom right corner and the right stick of your remote control all the way down to the center. Release both sticks. Then move the right stick all the way up to the center once and release it again. Now move the right stick again to the bottom right corner and then back to the center. The IMU calibration should now begin, which is indicated by the LED on the Protos blinking green 3 times. After 2 seconds, the IMU calibration is complete, which the Protos indicates by blinking green 4 times. Wait another 10 seconds before taking off. If you don't have a level surface available, you can place paper under one side of the Protos, specifically on the side where it drifts during hover flight, and calibrate the IMU in this position. After that, you can briefly test fly the Protos in hover flight indoors or in calm conditions, and if it still drifts to the same side, you can repeat the process with more paper under that side. Due to all my crashes and leaf blower flights, one of my Protos propellers broke. Replacing it turned out to be difficult because the propeller was very tightly stuck on the motor shaft. I managed it with 2 methods. With the kitchen knife method, which is not entirely ideal for the Protos because the knives scratched the ducts, something that could have been avoided by wrapping the back part of the knives with fabric tape or something similar. Using the prop puller I got from AliExpress, and about which I already made a video, also worked, but just barely because the propeller was so tightly stuck. I also couldn't fully press the new propeller onto the motor shaft with my fingers, which is why I decided to drill or file it out with a 1.48mm drill bit that I also bought on AliExpress. As you can see, this is not ideal for someone who doesn't have these tools available, so I can only hope that most of you won't have to replace the propellers on your Protos. It's always somehow possible, but in this case, it's really difficult. Check out the video on my channel about removing propellers. After the approximately 18 test flights I did with the Caddx Protos, my conclusion is that the Protos is robust enough and quite suitable for beginners. Its strengths are the good flight time, the robustness up to a certain degree, the completeness of the ready-to-fly kit, as well as the simplicity with which the Caddx Protos kit can bring you into the wonderful hobby of FPV flying. However, the Protos has its limits, which you now know all about after this video. From my point of view, the biggest disadvantage of the Protos is that it is not compatible with other systems. If you decide on the Protos, it will get you flying relatively easily and with a high probability. But if you then want more, you have to buy everything again, because the Ascent FPV goggles and also the flight batteries of the Protos are not compatible with other systems. The Protos itself is compatible with other transmitters, which doesn't change the fact that nothing on the Protos can be adjusted. The same applies to the transmitter of the Protos, which is indeed compatible with other FPV drones, but has no adjustment options whatsoever. I also don't know if spare parts for the Protos will be available in the future. I don't think so. Furthermore, there is at least one very strong competitor to the Protos that is about twice as expensive, but in almost every area, clearly more than twice as good. I think you see where this is going. If all these disadvantages are okay for you, then you can buy the Protos with a clear conscience. The price of the Caddx Protos Ready-to-Fly Beginner Kit is really very good. And if you handle the Protos carefully and can sell it again for half of the original price after your learning phase, then the whole thing is also financially worthwhile. I think the Caddx Protos FPV kit will successfully introduce many people to the hobby of FPV flying through the simplicity and completeness of the kit, and that alone is already a great thing. For that, I really have to give Caddx FPV credit. But I also want you to know that the easiest way is not always the best one. For some people it is, but for others, especially those with great perseverance, some patience, frustration tolerance, and the ability to learn more complex things independently, There are other ways that are definitely better suited financially, and also in terms of learning speed and future proofing. This also applies to people who don't yet have the skills mentioned above, but want to learn them. Personally, I now recommend taking the more difficult path and getting help from professionals. That means, from today's point of view, if I were to start with FPV again, I would first look for a local FPV group, and then, with their help, start the FPV hobby directly with professional equipment. However, I also understand everyone who decides on the Protos and wants to start the hobby with simplicity. I think many will enjoy their Protos. There is no right or wrong. The important thing is that you inform yourself well before buying and know what you want. That's why I made this video, to give you good information before and after buying the Protos. I hope you liked the video, and if so, you can support my work on ko-fi.com, give this video a like, write a comment, and subscribe to this YouTube channel if you want to be informed when I make a new video. I will make at least 2 more videos about the Protos. Stay tuned. Now I wish you lots of fun learning FPV flying. Also check out the tutorials on this channel about learning FPV flying and line-of-sight flying. In the next videos, I will push the Caddx Protos even further to its limits and answer any questions you might have that you write in the comments below this video. I will also answer all questions in the comments under this video within 3 to 7 days. Please write in the comments what you think of the Protos and/or what experiences you have had with your Protos. My experiences with the Caddx Protos kit were generally good, but because I pushed the Protos to and beyond its limits, it no longer works properly. Externally, it is still intact, but due to several crashes from greater heights onto medium hard ground, something inside the electronic components is probably damaged. In any case, the video reception is now significantly worse, and the 25 milliwatt setting is practically no longer usable for me. In the 100 milliwatt setting, it is still flyable. The second problem is that sometimes my Protos no longer connects to the remote control after being powered on. Then I have to remove and reinsert the battery, and usually the connection works again. Also, the flight modes no longer work as usual. In flight, I often can't switch between angle mode and position hold mode anymore. And sometimes I can't switch flight modes on the ground either. Then my Protos gets stuck in one flight mode. Sometimes it helps when I turn the flip over after crash mode on and off again. All these random problems show me that something in my Protos has broken. However, it still flies, and I hope I can do more test flights for you, at least as long as the motors hold up. From my point of view, they are not badly designed, but the play in the bearings and the slightly too thick motor shaft show me that it is probably not the best motor quality. I'm definitely curious how long the Protos will last for me, and of course, I will keep you updated. Stay tuned.